All right, well, you can go ahead and get started if you want to introduce yourself for the record.
Okay, for the record, I'm Gus Seelig. I'm the director for the Housing and Conservation Board.
I'm Liz Gleason. I'm the director of VHCB's Farm and Forest Viability Program.
And with us are our policy director, Polly Major, and Trey Martin, who you worked with on another piece of legislation that directs conservation programs writ large and rural community development. And just before we get back into the presentation, we've had so many intervening issues. Just a quick summary of, we, as the chair pointed out, are at this cross-section of land use where we do both affordable housing. We try to do it in the places that it makes sense, smart growth locations. We've done about 15,000 homes, while also, as the statute tells us, conserve the essential characteristics of the Vermont countryside, conserved about 445,000 acres of land over 35 years. And the largest portion of that investment has been to protect agricultural soils and agricultural lands. And the statute specifically asks us to preserve agricultural land for agricultural production. We also have a water quality mission in our statute that Chair Dean wrote in about a decade ago. And what we're going to focus on today is the Farm and Forest Viability Program and a piece of that program, the Rural Economic Development Initiative. I think we covered writ large our housing programs and our conservation work last time. And I just want to say two things as we begin. One is that you had a lot of testimony about the Working Lands Enterprise Board, which is a wonderful partner program. And in that there's a very strong relationship. And in the testimony you heard about WeLab, you heard that sometimes people submit applications that aren't ready and they get sent to the viability program, among other places, for technical assistance, business planning, and sometimes other kinds of assistance that helps them then be successful for WeLab. And I think you'd find in general, and this goes to some of the success factors Liz will talk about, lots of people who are successful at WeLab have been through the business planning program, have a business advisor that they work with periodically, and that makes a big difference to lots of enterprises. So there's a strong relationship between the two programs, in addition to the fact that I'm an ex officio member of that board. We highly value the work that they do and the grants that are made, and Liz will talk about that as well in terms of helping farmers access federal resources like the value-adding producer grants. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and Liz, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. Nice to see all of you again. I'm just going to do a really brief reminder on the background of the Farm and Forest Viability Program. We were added to VHCB's mission about 20 years ago. We've worked with over 900 businesses on in-depth business assistance and transfer planning, work with all different kinds of farms, small, medium, large, dairies, cow dairies, goat dairies, sheep dairies, livestock businesses, veggie farms, value added. And it's really about sort of the supporting people around the business management side of their work. We do this also through a network of partner organizations, many of whom you would have heard from: NOFA, Vermont, UVM Extension, and many others. We shared a bunch of stories last time. I'm going to skip right to where we left off. 20 years ago, we added this business advising program, and we've branched out in a couple of different ways since then. We realized that folks who had been going through our business planning program were looking to access capital and needed help doing that. We started running one grant program about 18 years ago, which we call implementation grants. Basically, people who have been through our program and identified really key projects that they need to do to move their business forward. They go through a whole financial assessment of all of them, and they can apply for funding to develop out one particular project. We've been doing that about every other year when funding is available for about 16 or so years. Like Gus said, we also had water quality added to our mission. We have a water quality grant program for all different kinds of farmers, but particularly dairy and livestock businesses. That's part of Vermont's clean water work. And we have been doing between $600,000 and $800,000 a year for that program, typically through the capital bill, and this past year through ARPA funds. And those water quality grants in particular are part of a huge ecosystem of work with Agency DAG and NRCS. They leverage tons of other funds, and we tend to be as flexible a funder as possible. Our project caps are generally smaller than NRCS, but can really help make really key water quality grant projects happen for farmers, because we can help match all of those other sources.
Liz, can you give us a sense of how many in 2022, how many different farms you might have helped with that 600,000? How far does it go? How far does it stretch?
It's about 18 to 25 a year, depending on whether it's closer to 600 or 800. So we just wrapped up FY23 awards, made 22 awards just this past week. And that's all different kinds of projects on all different kinds of farms that need support around water quality. It can be a really, massive project, like a huge manure management with a large farm. It can be something more targeted, like a bedded pack or equipment for cover cropping, that kind of thing. Really wide range of projects. An example here is Pegasus Meats up in South Hero. A couple of years ago, they got a $40,000 grant for their winter pig housing. They had been having issues with just lots of mud. They're close to the lake. They needed a better system to help manage that. It really keeps the moisture contained. It keeps the pigs dry and happy in the winter. So they're really pleased with that project. These are two examples of implementation grants. These are folks who have been through our business planning program and applied to us for money to implement a really key project. So Rebot Farm on the left is in Brattleboro. They had built out a really beautiful farm store like right before COVID. Things were just really busy for them and hectic and inefficient. They were getting all this increased interest in their business at the beginning of COVID, and we helped fund a walk-in cooler that just allowed them to be way more efficient with that space and meet a lot more demand for the local product that we were seeing. Sandy Bottom Farm up in Alamott. Similarly, they started as homesteaders and grew slowly over time. We worked with them on business planning, working with them to seek additional land this coming year. And their wash pack situation was really challenging. Like many small vegetable farms, building out a really good wash pack station is sort of a key milestone in your growth and efficiency. So an implementation grant for $10,000 helped them move to a 4-season. And just briefly, I'm going to touch on the response work we did during COVID. From 2020 to 2021, we worked with over 550 businesses on really short-term sort of emergency management. Our program is designed first and foremost to do long-term in-depth coaching. But many times over the history of this program, we have flexed our work and tried to meet emergency needs, whether it was a Hurricane Irene or COVID. And those 550 businesses are on top of the 900 that I mentioned in the first slide. So helps people get a lot of financing, a lot of grants during that time, help them really pivot to online markets, deal with human resources issues. And you'll see sort of a key theme through this is that access to capital piece, whether it's through the grants that we run, helping people get other grants, or through our Ready program, which I'll stick to. And just want to say that this COVID, we're obviously, you all know this, we're still seeing the effects of all the shifts and pivots that people had to make during COVID. But we really saw that the work here was so tied into sort of food resiliency as part of your mission, and making sure that we have like really vibrant local businesses that can withstand massive shifts in our economy. Shifting over to the Ready program, I'm actually going to stop share screen because I can't see the time. I mean, not share screen, full screen. Can't see the time and I want to make sure.
It's only 9:11.
Great. I was like, it's probably 9:30 already.
Want me to tell you this 9:20?
I can see the clock now.
Okay.
So just digging in more about the READY initiative, Rural Economic Development Initiative. As I've been saying, we had been doing a lot of this access to capital work and helping people get funding and financing before READY started in 2016, 2017. We had been helping farmers go after value-added producer grants. We had been helping people get really important loans. But we weren't able to really dig into that or meet the needs. And there was a big conversation around 2014, 2015, 2016 about some key federal funding sources that we felt like Vermont wasn't drawing down adequately. Particularly the value-added producer grant was a great example. We have so much amazing diversified agriculture in Vermont, but we weren't getting very many of those grants to our producers. New Hampshire was getting more, and they have far fewer farms than we do. So the Rural Economic Development Initiative was conceived as a way to really, it's a very targeted, specific program designed to help both working lands businesses and many others access those really big, complex federal grants, and in some cases, state or philanthropic funding as well. The goal of this was broader than working lands, though. We were tasked by the legislature and all of you to work with both working lands businesses, outdoor recreation, and other small communities trying to do really community-based economic development, particularly in towns under 5,000 people. We come in, we help them identify the best fit grants for them, do strategy around them, and then actually write and submit those really hard, tough applications. So we work with a host of grant writers and community development specialists who will work one-on-one either with a working lands business or a community group or a municipality to help them, look at that long list of grants that might be applicable to them, figure out what the criteria are, what's a good fit, how do you organize your volunteers to get this done, and then actually physically help submit those applications on behalf of communities. So since 2017, the cumulative amount of legislative state of Vermont funding to the READY program has been $525,000. And that has gone to help communities access over $10 million in grants. So people are really seeing a great impact from that. And most of the projects we work with are successful in getting the grants that they go after either in that first year, or we might write sort of a strategic plan for them that they use to access grants in the future.
Sure, can I ask just a really quick question?
Yes, please.
How would a town get started with you on this? Because this feels like something Crandall needs, but I don't think we have any idea how to start.
You can email me.
Perfect, okay.
I will connect you with Mariah Knopf, who's our program manager for the READY program.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would just add that in the Budget Adjustment Act, the governor asked and you gave $3 million to the Agency of Administration to assist small towns with all kinds of grant making. So our focus is more narrow than that. We've actually talked with the Agency of Administration about enlarging our program through that appropriation that's now gone into law. But there should be a lot of aid for small communities, and it may go beyond our expertises in recreation and food businesses and forestry. But, if your community needs help accessing infrastructure funds from ANR or VTrans, there should be aid coming. And I also talk with the Agency of Administration, not knowing all the things that Grand Isle might be interested in pursuing.
Great, thank you.
I was just thinking, your time at that, there was some discussion, I think, before about the small, I guess what I'm getting at is, what's your definition of small towns? Because there was I think with some of that money that was allocated for, in the budget adjustment, there was kind of like a criteria, there was a list, I think, somewhere of who could apply for that money, who was deemed small, and there was kind of a cliff in there. And I'm just wondering, how you guys determine that?
The statute gave us just the benchmark of 5,000 or less as our benchmark. So it's not the same kind of formula that's in the BAA for those funds, which are a little different. And I'm not up on all the details that went into the BAA.
So it's just a population of 5,000 is,
Yes.
okay, thanks.
Representative O'Brien.
Is there any possibility for you to use some ready funds for towns to hire grant managers? Because in Tunbridge, we using ARPA funds, hire a grants manager, which has been the best thing we've ever done, because we didn't, the town clerk and the treasurer were doing that work and our administrative assistant, but they never really kept up with it. And so talk about leveraging, it's like for $70,000 over 3 years, we'll probably, bring in 700,000. So I wondered if, it's sort of like, we can help you with this one grant, or we, with a match, you could have a grants manager who would work on all these different grants.
Really interesting question. I haven't been asked that yet. I think it's something we could consider, and our statute definitely recognizes that people need help both on the front end of actually getting them and once you get them, effectively administering them and staying in compliance. So I don't know, Gus, what's your reaction?
I think two reactions. One is just to say our expenditures on this over 3 years were $525,000, and we've grown the program. It's now a full-time person. But again, you allocated $3 million to the Agency of Administration. So raise that question, have folks raise that question with us, but also with the Agency of Administration, because their funding for this is larger than ours. And the needs of a specific community may go beyond the focus that you've put on us, which is around farm, food, forestry, recreation kinds of businesses.
Yeah, the average cost of a project that we do is, because it's pretty targeted, is around $5,000 to $7,000 to hire in a grant writer. But we also recognize that having someone like a grants manager with more capacity is really what a lot of towns do need to manage the influx of federal funds right now. Just an example of an outdoor recreation project that we did in Lindenville. We supported the Sanborn Covered Bridge and Riverfront Park to rehab this beautiful historic bridge and create a set of walking trails and park right along the river there that will bring the community and visitors in. That was a $350,000 NBRC grant that we helped community group, right?
And BRC, Northern Borders Regional Commission, and that's the newest and smallest federal agency, but through Senator Leahy, their reach has really expanded. So just for all of you representing small towns, it's a relatively new resource for Vermont, and well worth having the folks at home look into for all kinds of economic development projects.
Yeah, they're a great funder. Another example, the Bridgewater Community Center. This was an old school that was no longer being used. Like many small community and volunteer-led projects, it has had some hiccups and delays over time. The costs have increased to open this business, this community center, but had some really great success last summer, 2022. A childcare center opened in part of this building, and they have plans and have secured part of the needed funding to develop out the rest of the space into various offices, community spaces. It's a really exciting project. And a couple examples of farmers that we've helped get value-added producer grants. Agricola Farm in Panton, they raise pigs, they buy in pigs from other people, and they do cured meats. We've worked with LA on business planning over many years and helped her write a VAPG, value-added producer grant. She got over $200,000 for marketing, rebranding, hiring new staff. Value-added producer grants are really awesome, but very challenging grants to manage, and they can make a big difference for value-added producers. Similarly, Sweet Round Farm in Glover helped Paul and his team write a $114,000 grant for their dairy They make all kinds of cheeses, milk. We've also worked with him on business planning over the years, and we really do find that people who have done that sort of financial planning, organizing, business strategy are really best prepared to access these big grants. That's my last slide.
Yeah,
Chris,
so
anything you want to add?
I think we can give you back a few minutes, or if there are questions either from today or from when we were here last and we ran out of time, we're happy to talk with the committee, whether it's on this presentation or the need for housing for farm workers, which we mentioned as part of our work we're doing now. But we can also just say thank you and
No, don't.
stay on schedule.
I appreciate that. You know us well. I think we do have some questions, Representative Graham.
Yeah, what's the backlog in the farm viability program as far as like business planning and so on?
Like in terms of people wanting to access the program but not being able to yet? Or?
Are not getting help.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the time of the year, but generally we try to get people in as soon as we possibly can. And even if the business advisors we work with have full slates, we can almost always get people in for at least one meeting to kick things off. So we try to, our program manager tries to call everyone back who's interested in within a couple days and then get them connected to a business advisor within a couple weeks, no matter whether they can start like really digging in at that moment. But generally we're able to start projects within a couple weeks to a month or so.
What I would say to you, though, is that that's been possible because 2 years ago, the legislature gave us one-time funding that we invested to double the size of the program. And then last year, you increased our base funding so that we could make that increase permanent. So we've doubled our annual investment in the viability program from a little under $1 million a year to about 2 million. So we've just had a big ramp up. So if you ask us that question next year, we might have a different answer and say we need more resources. What we needed this year was to hold steady with our base level funding, which the governor had proposed to reduce. And I think the discussion in the appropriations committee is to keep it at least level, if not increase it. So really appreciate the letter you wrote to the appropriators on that.
And just to add to that, one of the things that we were able to do with that increased funding was hire 2 additional full-time farm and forest business advisors, which has made a really big difference. And that was working towards one of the recommendations in the strategic plan for agriculture to add quite a few business advisors. Those 2 don't meet the numbers in that plan, but it helps get us towards that.
I think the other thing I'd say, Representative Graham, is that things change all the time. So 2 years ago, with the pullout of one of the organic processors in the state, we focused a huge amount of resources on that. I think we're getting lots of calls from all organic milk producers now because the numbers are not working the way they did a few years ago. So demand ebbs and flows. We've been able to meet demand because we've had a big increase in our base funding and one-time funding, but there could be some other event, as was true with the pandemic, where we were helping 500 different businesses access federal resources.
Okay. Representative Levitt.
Quick question. I heard you guys say you're working on housing for farm workers, but is there any funding available for housing for farmers? Because I know now several farmers, not just the ones I talked about last time, have reached out to me and said, we put all our money into our farm and our house is not falling down around us.
So 2 different answers to that question. The first is that we met with a group of farmers last summer, and we recently hired on a contract basis Gil Livingston, the retired president of the Vermont Land Trust, to work on issues related to housing for farmers. There are programs around the state, and there are 5 home ownership centers that operate repair programs for housing. I don't know if those folks would qualify or not.
Okay.
If we're talking about the farmers themselves, but we have rolled out and invested about $2 million of our housing funds into farm worker housing so far. And based on the increase in one-time funding, We will enhance that again for the coming year. The last thing I'd say is we set aside some of the one-time funding for what we're calling an innovation fund. And we're looking at utilizing some of that money to help farmers with housing needs.
Great, okay, thank you.
Is for the Ready grants, part of the pot of property transfer tax
Yes,
funds?
yes, and that's why keeping that base as high as possible is so important to us. That's what allowed us to basically take the farm viability program and double our investment in it over the last 3 years.
We have time for Representative O'Brien's question and then we'll cut it off and move on. But again, sure.
So we didn't see much about the forest side of things in your slide deck, so I just, with the forest futures plan coming, I just thought you might touch on, if you're partners in that discussion, how those grants might change given, future of our forest.
Yeah.
Boundary.
Yeah, great question. We are part of that Forest Futures project. I'm on the advisory panel for it. About 10 to 20% of the businesses we work with in a given year are forest products businesses, and sadly didn't have so many on this slide deck because we always try to get pictures from where you're from and, that's the whole thing. But yeah, working with a lot of different kinds, from loggers to sawmills to processors to people making furniture, across the spectrum there, and have worked with a couple forest-based businesses through the Ready program, but there just are not quite as many grants for those kinds of businesses. Some of them can qualify for value-added producer grants, and we've worked with maybe 2 or 3 to apply for value-added producer grants. Courier Forest Products comes to mind as a recent one.
I think there was a slide earlier in the deck of Laughing Stock.
I can just scroll back quickly if you wanna, LSF Forest Products, otherwise known as Laughing Stock Farm, and White Rock Farm and Sawmill are a couple examples of, forest products businesses we've been working with the past, year or 2.
But a project from a few years ago that I think was a Ready recipient was the revitalization of the old Scrabble factory in Fairfax, which is now run amok maple.
The Scrabble factory?
That's where they made the Scrabble ties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Fun Vermont trivia.
Great.
So anyway, that's why I say we really think of ourselves more and more as rural community development writ large, focused on working lands.
Well, thank you for coming back to finish up.
Thank you for making more time for us.
Always happy to.
Yeah, no, I think it's important that we have a good understanding of the work you do, given the size of the budget request and just the various ways in which it intersects with the work we do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.